Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Diversion the Stars podcast. How are my loyal listeners? Thank you for your continued support. And as always, hit that subscribe button, everybody. We have an amazing show for you because boarding the mothership is William B. Davis. You know him as the cigarette smoking man in The X-Files. He's now the writer of On Acting and Life. Come join me as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Davis. Thank you so much for coming to the Diversion the Stars podcast.
Thank you for having me.
It's totally my pleasure, sir. It's a real honor. I love The X-Files, and I thought you're awesome.
Oh, thank you.
Totally my pleasure, sir. So I always start off with a question of inspiration. So what inspired you to write On Acting and Life, your new book?
It's a long story, but I'll try to keep it short.
As long as you need to.
I've been involved with acting since I was 11 years old. And as you can see, I'm quite a bit older than that now. So I've spent quite a lot of time studying, working on acting, either doing it, directing it, or teaching it. And I thought I had a lot to say about that. I've also had a fascinating, unusual career as an artist in this profession. And so I wanted to put them both together. Stephen King's book on writing inspired me with a format which is half biography, half the story of my life as an actor, and half basically masterclass on acting. And that's what inspired me, I guess.
Well, like I said, personally, I'm not an actor at all, but I found the book absolutely fascinating. Just discussing the creative process, how people approach performances and things of that nature. I think even if you're not an actor, just the information about how people approach a craft, I thought was absolutely essential and fascinating.
Oh, that's great. I hoped it would, because there are so many actors. It's a limited pool, but the people who watch actors is huge. So,
exactly.
So if you're interested all in acting and in watching actors, and everybody seems to have their own opinion about who's a good actor and who isn't. I hoped it would be interesting to people like you who are not in fact in the profession, but are observers of the profession. And so that's great.
Exactly. And I thought another thing, a group that would be very helpful for, because you talk a lot about directing, stage managing, a little bit about the writing process as well. And I was thinking to myself, as someone who likes to write, because I do, it's comic book, right? But I write, is that it gives you certain things to think about characterization that are, I think, similar to how an actor thinks about characterization. Things to, as we'll go into a little bit later, ideas like objective and things of that nature. And I thought to myself, as a writer, you gave me things to think about character development.
I think it's definitely common ground. It's basically an actor and a writer are marrying together to create a character. And so the processes are quite similar. The things you have to do, the things you have to find, the discoveries, the methodology, it's all very similar.
So when in writing the book, in the process of doing the writing yourself, what insights did you gain by reflecting on your life and the craft? Were there things that you thought about or change that you thought about as you were now going to a deeper analysis of why acting was the way you thought it was, or how the craft or you developed over time?
Definitely. Part of the arc of the story, I didn't know in advance quite a bit about how I had developed my concepts. But when you actually come down to really looking at them in detail and really trying to communicate them, you realize that certain things are not clear, or certain things may be more clear. What was fascinating for me was, after writing the book, when I went back to teaching, I was so much more articulate, so much more clear about what I was looking for and how to help an acting student get where I thought they should go. So definitely things clarified in the process.
So some of the things, I'm sure as an actor you do on instinct, were you able to parse that apart and figure out the reasoning behind what you might have considered as an instinctual move or technique?
Well, the kind of underlying philosophy, or the underlying technique, the underlying idea of the book really is that you need to know why you say what you say, when you say it, the way you say it.
Mm,
And so finding out how that happens, it can sometimes be an intellectual or analytical process, which uses a certain part of the brain which is a bit slow and cumbersome, and is not the process of the brain that really wants to come alive when you actually perform.
mm,
Um, but it sets the ground, it sets you on the trajectory, so that then the instinct that you need to have as an actor flows in accordance with the script that you're doing. It's often easy for an actor to really improvise, so long as they don't have to fit any particular pattern. They can do what they feel like.
right.
But when you want to actually do and say what Macbeth does and says, then you need to know much more clearly what's going on in the mind, and then still have that instinctive release.
Mm. Well, you shared an actually really interesting story about radio acting and from a producer. You basically share a story about producer. I'll probably get the name wrong. S.A.
S.A. Young,
Young.
S.A.
Okay,
Young,
so
yeah.
I totally got to butcher the name, and I apologize.
No, that
S.A.
would be
Young.
difficult. Yeah.
And he taught you basically. You said the difference between talking and reading. Now, can you explain that concept a little bit? And does that same skill correlate to acting in theater and film?
Um, when you often see a stilted actor, in some way they're stilted, they're artificial, they're often reading. They're reading their line, even though they've memorized it. They're essentially reading. They're not talking.
Okay.
And you work with some really experienced actors, and they're often just, they pick up a script and they're talking. It's just natural for them to sound talking. And you look at it, oh, they're saying what's on the script, but it sounds like they're just making it up.
Mm,
So what happened to me at age 11 was I was auditioning for this radio series for the Canadian Broadcasting Corporation, and S.A. Young was this experienced producer, and he listened to me read, and I guess he thought it was okay. But then he had me put the script down and do it without looking at it, so that it seemed like I was talking.
mm,
And I think people have said to me about my acting ever since that it sounds like I'm talking,
mm.
that I'm not making speeches or coloring a speech, but I'm actually talking.
Now, can you teach an actor to sound genuine, or is that something that you need to kind of just do?
uh, no, I think you can teach a lot of that because it's natural to be genuine. What's usually preventing it is some idea they have about what the acting should be that's getting in the way of being what is really a much simpler process. Uh,
Mm,
I had a student the other day she was very dramatic and blah 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 blah, and it was all quite artificial. And somehow I was able to get her to do something just ever so simple, and it was just moving. It just became so illuminating. So I think, yeah. So I think you can get people to be genuine, whether you can get them to have range and all the other things that an experienced superstar actor might have is another matter. But just to be genuine, I think that's certainly possible. Yes.
well, it's kind of interesting that you talk about like the super actor, because you have some great references to one of the best actors probably ever, Donald Sutherland, and there's a lot of good stories you share about him. So, like, could you tell which qualities made him unique as an actor, and are the qualities you think that he possessed duplicatable, that you can say, "Hey, do this like Donald Sutherland was doing it"? Can you like learn whatever essence he had and translate it to somebody else?
No, not in a way. I've known him too long, maybe because when we were at university together, and he was really a raw beginner, and really his work was pretty dreadful. It was very kind of awkward, and I know I had a partner and I were running a summer theater company at the time, and my partner insisted we get Sutherland to play this part in a play called Harvey, and I thought, yeah, but he's such a bad actor. No, 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 no. He said, no, 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 he'll be fine in that, and he was, because it was a very kind of ingenuous kind of character, and he was
Mm,
quite lovely in it. Um, but he was still just kind of all over the map. But then he went to theater school in England, which he hated, he said. But he did a lot of other work And then he did a whole season in Rep. And by the time I met him again in England, and we were doing plays together, he was a different actor. He had all that spark and raw stuff that he originally had, but it had form now. He had a way of making it part of fitting it with the text and fitting it with what had to happen. And he's just gone on from there. But he did have a particularly unique presence, I think, that's not replicable. You can't say just be like that. That was unique to him. Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of interesting because you do talk a little bit about like what is charisma, what is, and all that. Is that something you figured out? Why someone may have whatever that is?
We think about that a lot. People used to say that about Olivier. He would come on the stage, even if he was in the background, and everybody would kind of look over and watch him.
Right.
And what is that? And I don't know that any of us have ever really defined it. There's a level of focus, a level of kind of connection. I mean, he's obviously not thinking about what he had for lunch yesterday. He's somehow connected to the story.
Right.
And there's a level of vulnerability too. I think it's a strange thing about actors, but they live in a dangerous profession, but have to be remarkably vulnerable as people, or at least in the work. So they come on with an openness and a focus, and you can't not watch them. And you notice that especially on stage, but you can notice that in film too. There's film actors that you gravitate to, and others that you don't really. So
that is weird because like I said, there are like a recent actor. I was watching recently the TV show C with Jason Momoa, and he just captures a screen for like, it's hard to, there's something there. You just, when he's on, your head just pops up a little bit. You're like, yeah, I gotta see that moment. And it's hard to tell as a fan what that is, other than the fact, obviously he's good at whatever that is and he's making it happen, but I can't define why when he talks, you go up and you're like, oh, it's this scene,
Yeah, exactly.
So when Donald Sutherland came back and he showed that the form of his performance, all right, or harness, whatever it is that he had, did you and him discuss what he learned from, or that change, or was it not that kind of relationship at the time where you were discussing acting in the process?
Now that's a good question, and it's a long time ago, so I'm not sure that I remember really. I remember more talk about what he didn't like. He didn't like aspects of his training. It's really interesting because he didn't like Iris Warren and what she did with his voice. And she was a famous acting teacher who was the founder of the Linklater method, or became the Linklater method. And it's interesting because talking to Brian Cox recently, who was a great fan of Iris and Kristen, and they both, Brian and Donald, went to Lambda and came out, Brian devoted to this voice method and Sutherland hating this voice method. And I would just love to give them drinks and sit them down together and talk about it.
Well, they're two extraordinary actors. I mean, they're both amazing. It'd be nice to be a fly on that in that room and just listening to it, the conversation.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, I mean, not only as an actor though, but you've had also extensive experience as a stage manager and a director. How did being on that side of acting, the director, stage manager part, and the production process give you a greater insight into acting itself? And do actors just inherently make better directors?
No, actors don't inherently make better directors. What actually happened in my career was I actually decided when I was at university that I was a director. I had been an actor, a young actor, but that what I really thought I had the most talent for and was most interested to do was direct. And I actually went to theater school to study acting so that I would know more about what an actor does as a director. And for 20 years, that's all I did. I directed in the theater primarily, and did some teaching as well. But and so I learned an enormous amount about acting and what actors do. There are directors who know nothing about what actors do. There are directors who just tell you what they want you to look like, and there's other actors who don't even tell you what to look like. They just tell you where to stand. And but certainly in the 50s, I think in the 60s, the idea of a really engaged director, the Elia Kazans of the world, who really got in the muck with the actors and really worked with them on their process. And that was what fascinated me about directing. The stage management side is I didn't do a lot of stage management. I did some, but what's interesting is knowing how the physicality of the scene, whether it's on film or whether it's on stage, affects the actor. And even the actors often don't know that you have to put them in the right relationship to each other and the right relationship to whatever else is on the set or in the scene. And then it becomes natural for the actor. But if they're not in a good relationship to the other actor, or a good relationship to the spatial situation, they're often much more awkward. And yeah, nobody ever sees that, except maybe another director.
Well, I must admit, I loved your stories about acting and directing, or with actors with directors. I'm trying to remember which context it was, but you're talking about, sometimes you have a director saying, I want you to do more like this, or show me more energy. And your response was basically, as the actor goes, just say yes and do what you want to do anyway. I thought that's one of the best responses I've ever heard.
That I don't know whether it's apocryphal, but that's the story came from an artistic director at the National Theatre School of Canada. This was after I was there, and the story is that yes, he came into a class and the student was arguing with the director, and it wasn't going anywhere. And Douglas Rain, who was the artistic director, said to the student, no, that's not how you deal with this situation. You say, thank you very much, and do what you wanted to do anyway.
I just think that's awesome. Is the director sometimes an obstacle to overcome as the actor?
Oh, yes.
Yes.
Oh, yes. Yes. I had one once. It was we really had to challenge him because he had decided every single move that you were to do. You were to raise your finger this high on this line. You were to look that way. No, not that far, just that. We just had to say, no. We're not puppets. We're creators, and you have to back off. But actors, directors will, often have a concept of the play or the film. Happens more in the theater, actually, that they would have a concept that's at odds with the text. So, it's kind of they're imposing something on the text, but they don't have to say the words. You, the actor, have to say the words. Now, they don't fit that concept. You've got a problem.
Right.
In film, where you more often have a director writer is the same person, you don't get that conflict as often because the director actually wrote the script. So at least you're in more harmony with the text.
So the directors that are very particular, as you said, point here, look over here, but not that far. Do they tend to be newer, younger directors, or are you finding even experienced veteran directors still doing those things?
Yeah, they'd be relatively newer directors, I think, or less experienced. Yes.
Do you think the younger directors who do that kind of stuff, do you think it's a misunderstanding of directing, or do you think there's some sort of vision that they're just so obsessed with that they need it or control that they need it their way?
I can't say, because the example that I gave you is so long ago, it doesn't apply really to current young directors. And I haven't encountered that with any current young directors. So no, even the younger ones that I've worked with on film and television have been pretty responsive, pretty easy to talk to, pretty easy to try and find what's going on. And so no, I don't think that's so common now.
So when in working with all the directors you've worked with in time, what kind of director have you enjoyed working with the most? Is it completely hands off? Is it ones that just give you one or two, words of advice? Can you do it more sort of like this or that?
That's a good question. And sometimes I think the only good director I've ever really wanted to work with was me. But uh, um, I had a quite young director many years ago, and all she did was ask me questions. She would say, "Well, why are you doing that?" Or "What's this about?" And that was fantastic because she didn't impose anything, but she would obviously ask the question because there was something she didn't. If it felt obviously correct, she didn't need to ask the question. So there was
Right.
something she was probing for, but she didn't tell you, it's this, do that. She
Mm.
said, "What is this? What is it?" And then we engaged in what was it, and it was very collaborative. And um, so I'm trying to think. And then in film and TV, well, in TV at any rate, directors don't work very closely with the actor's process very often.
Mm.
They're very involved with the shots and the angles and all of that. That usually what they have to say for the actor is limited, and it's often good. It's often
Mm.
good. Um, but I wouldn't call it inspiring. It wouldn't call it leading you to a performance you didn't know you could do, which is what you
Mm.
really want from a director. And you want to go, "Oh my God, I didn't think I could do that." That's really what's exciting.
So, talking about directors, are you thinking about doing more TV or film directing yourself?
Um, Not at the moment. And I was going to be directing a stage play, but they talked me into acting in this stage play. So I'm acting in it instead of directing it, which is kind of unusual for me in these small scale theater productions that we do. I usually direct them. So it's interesting and fascinating for me to be acting in that context. Um, but so much of my career has been kind of following what comes next. Um, so if certain things work out, well, I can be candid about that because I have a contract for it. If Midnight Club goes to a second season, I'll be very busy with acting in Midnight Club for several
Mm.
months. If it doesn't, then I'll be looking for projects to do, and might well. It's quite a while now since I've directed any film, so it would be interesting to go back to it, but I've a bit lost touch with it.
Have you considered being, to use a baseball analogy, because I love baseball, like a player manager and directing something that you're in as well as an actor?
I've done it in film, and it works in film, especially if you have a good AD or a good assistant, whatever. Because in film, you can look at what you did. In the theater, I don't think it works very well. Because you're actually on stage with the people you're directing, and unless you're very good at splitting your focus, I think that's pretty hard to do. I mean, the old guard, the Oliviers and people, they did it all the time, and they got some
Mm.
very good results. But I don't know now, and certainly a method actor would have a lot of trouble with it, I think. Yeah.
So, when you have directed other actors, um, is it difficult for you to talk to some of the other actors sometimes because or criticize when you see an actor not doing what they're supposed to be doing, or maybe not as a director, maybe as just another actor, and feel that this other actor just isn't doing it? Is it tough to go up to the actor and be like, or do you ever go up to the actor and be like, "Hey,
Hey, you're
is
not doing this.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I'm not feeling this at all." Is that hard? Is it easy, especially with your director background and your actor background? You know better than most when it's not working.
Yeah, exactly. And it's a very delicate thing. I mean, when I was a young director, I just blew it once by telling this experienced actor that I thought he was, quote, acting. And that was just the wrong thing to say to a pro. You could say it to a student, that you're indicating is what you'd probably
Yeah.
say. Um, and with a student or a very young actor who's working on their process, then you can help them with their process. You can help them correct the process. But a good example was when Michael Elliott was directing Miss Julie with Maggie Smith at the National Theatre, and I was an assistant director. And Maggie, even to this day, lovely though she is, has a lot of tricks up her sleeve. She does a lot of mannerisms. Ta-da!
Yeah.
and sometimes they're not appropriate. But Michael did not go up and say, Maggie, you're playing your tricks again. He just took them away, just sort of one by one. No, we won't do that. We won't use that prop or whatever. And she was forced to work very truthfully without it, but no challenge to her at all.
Right.
Constantly reaffirming the talent that she had, which is what he was doing, was basically releasing the talent that she had. It wasn't imposing anything on her. So,
well, one thing I find kind of interesting, because as we come back to what we discussed earlier about, as an actor, you say yes to do what you want to do anyway. But you've also been the director. Have you ever had an actor say yes to you, then do what they want to do anyway? And as the director, how did that go down with you?
Yes. Then you have to find a way. I mean, there's always the possibility that the actor was right. So I mean, you have to be open to that possibility. But given that it's not right, you have to find a way to get to it. What happens sometimes is that the actor wants to do blah blah, but the other actor has to react to what the first actor does. And if the first actor doesn't do blah blah but does blay blay, then the other actor may not be able to do what they do, which may be to cry, to react, to get strong, or even to say, I mean, an example that I had once in a play I was directing was, and I mentioned it in a book, was the actor had to say, I'm Trofimov, your old tutor. And when I saw it on stage after a while, I couldn't hear the line. I said to the actor, I said, I can't hear it. And he said, yeah, but I can't say it because she's already recognized me.
Yeah.
So I don't have to say it. But what should have happened is the other actor doesn't recognize him yet. So he has to say it to tell her who he is.
Right.
So often there's a situation like that, which can be corrected by clarifying the context with the actors.
As an actor, is your quality performance affected by the quality of the person you're acting against? If you are acting against a bad actor, is your acting on your own inherently going to be pulled down? And does it work in the opposite, where if you're working against a good actor, is your performance pulled up?
Oh, the second one for sure.
Yeah,
for sure. And I did this really strange exercise once. What they wanted me to be a rehearsal actor for the production of Needful Things that they were doing with a lot of top actors, and so I just worked for a week with these actors when I was kind of just getting back to acting. But I had to do a scene with Ed Harris, and it was astonishing to me what came from him, and it's just a rehearsal. But it made me do blah, blah. That made him do blah, blah. And boom, we had this scene. It was just electric. But it wouldn't have happened without him, without the way he was giving of what he does. And then I've worked with other actors who do. It's just so easy to act with them. You just have to react to them because it's there. But actors who are artificial or who don't give out anything, and then you're in a sense, you find yourself imagining what you think they would be doing and reacting to a performance they're not actually giving, and then it's never as vital, it's never as electric.
So one thing that you said that's very interesting, you use a word indicating. Now, for those of us who are not actors, what is the difference between indicating and acting then?
Aha, you've nailed it. Indicating is when I'm trying to show you, the audience, what's going on.
Okay.
So I'm very upset. I want you to know. See, I'm really upset. But it's not natural. It's not how the upset person would be. I'm really upset. You don't have to do that. You don't have to show the... Carol Rosenfeld, who's a famous acting teacher in New York, talks a lot about disobligating yourself from the audience. So you're not trying to tell the audience a story. You're trying to create a living scene on stage or on set. that will tell the story. But it's not up to you to tell the story. It's up to the writer. Well, it's up to you, the writer, to tell the story. We'll just try to make it come alive. That's our job. But when we get involved in trying to show you what we're doing, it's almost always artificial in some way. There'd be different ways that would reveal itself. But
well, it kind of reminds me of something that you said, and I wonder if this connects to indicating at all. You say a phrase, if you're crying, the audience won't.
yeah,
now, that means that's indicating?
No, it doesn't. That's different.
Okay.
I think it was Stanislavski who said that. At least I keep thinking it was Stanislavski who said that. No, it's not, because the character might genuinely cry in that circumstance,
Okay.
So that it could be quite believable. It's just, frankly, not very interesting. I don't want to watch people crying. I hate those scenes in I watch a lot of crime drama, way too much. But I hate those scenes where they come to tell the parents that their child has just been murdered or whatever. And often I don't think they are actually believable, because then the actor feels they have to do a big cry right then. They have to do all their method tricks to be, have real tears and whatever. But in real life, that probably isn't what happens. In real life, you're stunned, and it could take weeks before you come to tears. It's not, so sometimes that's artificial, but sometimes it's because the person you want to cry is the audience, and it's a big trap in Chekhov a lot, because the characters cry a lot in Chekhov. But if you take a lot of time, as I have sometimes been mistakenly done as a director with the actors, and they've cried too much, the audience has tended to be restless. But when you take it quickly and move it, then the audience gets caught up in it, and then they cry. And that's what I want to happen. I can't remember what play this was. But it was the end of the play, and the character's on stage, and it's very moving. And then he cries. And then I went, oh, it just pulled me right out. I was no longer empathizing. I was watching an actor acting.
So when you're seeing someone do a performance that either is overacting or, as you said, indicating, is the issue trying to show off, or is it a lack of understanding of the human nature involved in that moment?
Yes. I mean, I say that because it could be either. Yeah, it could certainly be either. It could be also an insecurity, a thinking you need to do more than you need to do. Yeah, there are a lot of different reasons that could happen.
I will say, as a fan, when you can see someone acting, is always the worst. When you're watching, you're like, "Wow, that person's trying really hard on that screen."
Exactly. Right. I know. Yeah.
It is great. Like natural acting, what looks like natural acting, when it just looks like the character, is impressive as a fan watching that happen. But it's hard to be natural in these moments and get your ego out of the scene, because I'm sure as an actor you do want, there's part that does want to, spotlight's on me now, this is my moment.
Exactly.
But how is it hard to pull yourself away from that, your ego, and just be like, I'm just gonna do it right. I'm not gonna try to show like this is, I'm the next, I don't know, Denzel Washington or whatever, and just act.
Well, one of the things that's so hard to do but so important to do is to get the attention off yourself, because in real life, when you watch yourself, you're usually awkward. Whether you're watching the front wheel of your bicycle or you're watching yourself, you're a boxer and you've just watched your good punch, and then you get punched back while you're watching the one you just did. Right? So getting the attention off yourself is really key. And it can be on the other actor that you're trying to affect or that you're working with. It could be on what's in your mind, in your mind's eye. But if it's on me, how am I acting? How's it going? That's when it gets awkward often. And it's challenging, especially in film, because when you do your close-up, everything is on you, close up on William. Okay, it's William's close-up. Everybody, okay, on close-up, and everything lines up against you. Everybody's watching you, and you I have to get your attention off you. But yeah, that's a challenge.
Well, you share a fascinating analogy that was given by Michael McOwen,
Michael McCullough,
where
yeah.
yeah, where you compare acting to gardening. Now,
Yeah.
is the analogy of the gardener, is that the actor themselves as the analogy, or is it the teacher or director to the actor that's the analogy?
It can be both. It was
Okay.
more in the context of actor training than in actor directing, but he was encouraging us as young students to let our work develop and don't keep analyzing how it's doing, and don't keep. So he said, like, you can't, if you pick up a plant to see how it's growing, well, it's too bad for the plant, right? And so he was encouraging you always to just let it go, keep finding your path, and not. There was this terrible thing that happened in acting schools, where the director would say to the class on the opening day, look to the left, look to the right. Only one of you will be here at the end of the year.
That's brutal.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. And unfortunately, Michael McCohen, who was my principal at Lambda, did the opposite. He said, because you're talented, trust it, go with it.
Now, the one interesting thing, and it felt like you had a lot to say about it, is the idea of the method actor. So I kind of want to dive into that, because there's certain actors, I don't know if I'll say the names, that doesn't matter. Ones you had people like Jim Carrey when he did Andy Kaufman. He's like, I was Andy Kaufman, and talk about how like day in, day out, he just was that guy. Everyone referred to him as Andy, things of that nature. What do you think of people who attempt that technique where they're saying like, I got lost in the character, blah, blah, blah? Is that acting? Is that a confusion of what acting is supposed to be? What do you feel about that kind of idea of method?
But yeah, there's so many aspects to the method, some of which are very good and some of which are, I think, unnecessary. I don't know that it's wrong to do that, or who was the actor who played Lincoln, who was Lincoln for 2 years. Her name will come to me in a minute. But I mentioned that in my book, and I said, what does his wife think? Did she have to make love like Mrs. Lincoln did? I don't know how that works.
Right.
But I also don't know why it would be important. We do know that we're moving into an artificial situation. We do know, or an imaginative situation, let's put it that way. So when we enter on screen or enter on stage, we know we're moving into an imaginative world. So we want to give that life. And then when it's over, we know we're coming out of this imaginative world. I don't know what value it is of taking it with you, especially because it's going to conflict with all sorts of things. I mean,
Right.
this character didn't really have a mobile phone, so I better not use my mobile phone for 2 years. I better ride a horse to work. So I've never tried it. I've never been close to someone who's been doing it, but it seems to me it's not necessary. And I've watched wonderful actors who know perfectly well that they are Derek Jacobi, and when they step on stage, they're Claudius. I mean, they know.
Is it a fear? Is it a fear, you think, with some method acting, that they feel they can't get back there again if they lose it? That they kind of feel like they always have to be him all the time?
Well, actually, now that you put it that way, I think it's a misunderstanding of human nature altogether, because it assumes that we have some kind of essence. And, there's a kind of duality of a spirit and body, and the spirit's going to go to heaven and the body's going to go to the grave. And this duality, I don't believe exists. I believe we're animals, we're functions of millennia of evolution. And we don't have an essence. We may not even have a self. We think we do. It feels as if we do. But there's been a lot of experiments that show that actually what we think is a self, we think is directing our behavior. It's actually watching our behavior. But without going into that too deeply, but I think then what happens is, as an actor, I think, well, I have my essence, and then the character has their essence. So my job is to get from this essence to that essence. And that's hard. And then once I'm there, I better stay there, as you were saying, because it might slip away. But I think the whole thing's a myth. There is no essence either. You're trying to go from nowhere to nowhere. So
as the actor, have you ever had to act against someone who's like deep method like that? And does it affect you trying to interact with an actor who I guess is losing themselves in the role in that sense?
No, because if at the moment they're alive, they're generating what needs to happen in the scene. There's it doesn't really matter how they got there for me playing opposite them, if it's believable. If it's indulgent, and that can happen as a side effect, I suppose, of the method, is that you tend to indulge the emotions. But that's another form of indicating, really, or just not being true.
So you also discussed the power of editing and how it affects the performance. So in film, and I guess TV as well, how much of the decision of the performance is still the actors, and how much has it been determined by the guy sitting at the tapes, it's cutting out moments and scenes and seconds and changing things, and then you got CGI altering things. So at what point is it still the actor's decisions, and how much is it the editor decision on a performance now?
That's a good question. I know when we were doing radio, and we didn't have to match it to anything, any visual effects, I could do a huge amount with editing. I could really make performances happen that didn't when I was editing them. But now the editor has quite a bit of control. A lot depends how it's recorded, how it's and some directors will say, well, give me that line 3 different ways, so you just kind of artificially do it 3 different ways, and the editor will choose which one. And you can do that and piece things together. It's not very organic, but you can make it seem good. Timing is of course the biggest thing. The thing that I see happen quite often, is the one actor does something that affects emotionally the other actor. And they sometimes, to speed up the play, or they're short of time, they don't have enough time, they cut it too tight. So that the emotional reaction is happening before the trigger. And so it becomes artificial. Either they're laughing or crying or whatever before the thing could possibly have landed on them. But the other thing that could happen in reverse is that the actor is very slow, takes big long pauses that aren't really believable and aren't really useful, and the editor can tighten them all up so it seems much more natural too.
So as the actor, does it affect your mindset knowing when you're in film or TV that it could later get changed in the editing process?
Yes. I've never been guilty of it. Well, I say this, but maybe but I know people who've worked with people on series and stuff, and when they have felt they're not playing it very well, they'll do something stupid so that they can't possibly use this take. Yeah, so that can happen.
That's absolutely awesome. One thing that your book hit me as a writer and got me thinking about my writing process is a term that you used a lot in your book, and I think it's a great term. The idea of finding one's objective. As a writer, I was thinking to myself, when I'm writing, I should be sitting there and really thinking. I should be thinking about the objective of all my characters in every scene instead of thinking about, because I think there's a tendency to think about only your main character. This is my main character, this is what he wants, but I'm not thinking about, wait a second, there's 5 other people in that room. Why am I not worried about what they're thinking at that exact moment?
Yeah, exactly.
So when you're talking about the objective as an actor, I thought that was such an important concept. I would like you to expand on that for the listeners.
Yeah. I mean, and sometimes we've gone too far with it, I think, but basically, so often in a drama, you're pursuing a goal. There's something I want. There's something I want you to listen to me now. I want you to do what you just did. I want you to nod your head. Now, this is good. It's going very well. So I have an objective to convince you of something, to explain something to you. and to get a response that is believable. Or I could just talk like this and I don't really have the objective, so I'm just talking kind of over there, and then it's not alive. But the other side of it is that I have an objective, but you have an objective. You have a different one. And what makes the story is that mine conflicts with yours, interacts with yours, and something else happens. So when you say to an actor, don't play the scene, because you tend to want to play how it ends. You play what you do, and the other actor does what they do, and the combustion of that leads to the scene. And that's what's dramatic and exciting.
So if you're an actor, how do you invent the objective if it's not clear in the scene that your character really has been giving one?
You don't well, that's a good question too. Yes, I think some acting teachers have you invent one. I think it's a question of discovering one. I'm not big on inventing. I'm not big on adding. Actors will sometimes say, "I'm going to play it this way," or da da da. No, I'm trying to discover what's going on. So I'm trying to discover what you, the writer, put in there. I mean, yes, the objective is not written out. What's written out is because you want blah blah, you're doing blah blah. So all I see is the blah blah, but I have to find out something underneath that makes me want to do that. It may not be exactly what you thought as the writer, but if it makes it come alive for me, then it works.
One thing that I think you stated, and I some clarification. You said, as an actor, you don't need to write a backstory for your character. Is that accurate?
Yes, I said that because what you need, it's not that you don't need a backstory. It's that if you kind of put it out in categories, I'm going to do a character biography, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do that. You can just waste a lot of time. That's all. You could just spend extra time. If you come at it from the other side, which is, oh, this is what I do, this is what I say, why do I do that? Well, there must be something different about my background because I wouldn't do that. So I need to have a different background that would make me do that. So then I go and I look for the clues in the text to tell me what the background actually is, or where I don't have something in the text to help me with that, then I have to make one up so that I actually have a background that allows me to give life to this. So it's kind of working the other way backwards. You'll still end up with a character biography, but you're only focused on what you need to do what you do. Your job is to give life to the little black marks. Your job is not to do text analysis. Your job is not to write an essay about this play or this character. Your job is to bring it to life. So do what you need to do for that.
I found it was kind of fascinating. Like I said, I really enjoyed reading your book. I think the certain part near the end where you had the 3 don'ts, and I was thinking to myself as a fan who doesn't understand acting at all, really, it seemed counterintuitive. You said, don't learn the lines and don't play a character, and I thought to myself, wait a second, you learned the damn lines, but so kind of explain like the counterintuitive of what I'm not seeing as the fan who doesn't understand the process.
You don't. You have to know the lines.
Yeah.
And it's a bit of a trick thing. But when I say don't learn the lines, what the tendency of actors is to do is to memorize the text. And God knows there are videos about it. There's books about how to memorize. What tricks do you use? And it's really boring, and it's really hard work. But if I do something slightly different and say, why do I do this? Why would I want to do this? Why do I want to say this now? And once I have a feeling of why I want to say it, then I'll know it. And then, when I get the right impulse, I'll just say it. And sometimes that's too ambitious, because if the text is too complicated, you can't do it all the time. Sometimes you do have to memorize part of it.
Right.
But it's a way of approaching it that leads you into it, and it's just plain more fun. It's just plain more interesting to work on the scene than to memorize the scene. The thing about not playing a character goes back to what we were talking about the two essences.
Okay.
I'm not trying to play this person over here. I'm trying to find out what would make me do this. And so I'm the character, but how am I different from the way it's written?
That's really cool. And I think you mentioned in the book as well, and I'll put you on the spot a little bit, that you've written 2 plays. Now, are you considering doing more with that? Now, and how do you approach the writing, understanding yourself as the actor, and now also, once you've been published twice as a writer as well? Is that something you're considering putting out there?
Did I say I'd written 2 plays?
I think you said 2 in there.
Anyway, maybe. I know I wrote them when I was at theater school, and I wouldn't want to even read it now. But and I've done some short films, some of which I actually still like, which I wrote, directed, and in some cases acted in as well. So, sorry, what was your question about that?
So, is that something you're considering putting out there into the world, your plays or future plays?
No, there's nothing that I've written in the past that I'm thinking of putting out there, and hopefully they won't be found.
One day they'll be sort of like a Tupac, some years later, new work from William Davis.
But yeah, well, they did that like with Tennessee Williams, and I don't think it's fair. There was a reason his play that he wrote when he was 15 that he didn't show to it.
Do you see yourself writing a 3rd book then, either about acting or a biography or anything else in the future?
I could. I mean, it's really been a pleasure to do. Strangely, one of the books I've thought about writing is a history of skiing, which would be a whole different departure. But because I've been a skier since I was 5 years old, and threw the skis down the steps of my house, saying, I'm never going skiing again. You could get yourself killed on these things. And I'm still doing it in my 80s. So I don't know if there's a market for that, but it'd be fun to do. So I don't know. I don't know the answer to that question.
Well, like I said, it's been a pleasure talking with you. Where can our listeners find On Acting and Life?
They can find it in various places. You can find it, as you can find anything, on Amazon. You can find it on my website, which is williambdavis.com. And on my website at williambdavis.com, you can also order a signed copy, a personalized copy, if you wish.
Oh, very cool.
You can't do from Amazon. And certainly local bookstores in various parts of North America.
Are you able to get signed photos as well, or no?
Yes.
From the website.
Yes.
Oh, very cool. I'm an autograph hound. If you ever came to my house, the walls are wallpapered with autographs.
Oh,
people.
Wow, cool.
It's like all over my wife is so tolerant. I love her so much. But you go on the walls, it's basically like wall to wall, just autographed from actors, comic book writers, things of that nature. And it's like my whole house is just wallpapered with it.
Yeah. No, go for it. There's a shop on my website. It's the William B. Davis /shop.
Well, for our listeners, on the YouTube notes and on the website notes, we'll put on the website will be there. So hopefully they check it out and buy some merch.
Yeah, go for it.
Well, Mr.
Well, thank you. It's been a pleasure. Yeah, you too. Bye-bye.